And now I want to delve a little into the Nnamdi Kanu's case, right? What do you think about the appeal court's ruling for his acquittal and all of that? They've acquitted him, but yet he is still held by the federal government, and the federal government is appealing against the appeal court's judgment. So what do you have to say about all of that?
Okay. If you don't mind, let me take you back a couple of years ago. For a lot of youngsters these days, people who are less than 30 years old, yeah, maybe even less than 40, who were still toddlers when the incumbent was president, they might not remember. One of the greatest problems we've had in our polity is the incursion of military men into our political space. They put us in this mess, this huge mess which we are in. And if they had allowed our country to move at its pace in the 60s, we would have found our feet. It's very interesting when you look at the British Parliament, when they're debating and, they would say all they want to say and abuse each other, but you never see them flinging chairs or whatever. The same with the American system. They can be very caustic with their tongue and all that. It's debate. You debate your way out of it. There's no wuru to the answer. What the military tried to do, because they're not essentially trained for governance, they're trained to protect our country, to defend the territorial integrity of Nigeria, and everything they do is order. They just give an order and you carry it out. They don't discuss in the military. They give they issue orders. When the gentleman who is now the incumbent president was military head of state between December 31st, 1983 and 27th of August, 1985, he committed the same faux pas. Yes. And it got Nigeria into trouble internationally. And that's because the military don't know how to, they think we civilians are too slow. They want to hasten things. You don't do that in politics. You don't do that. There's a process, and it's called due process and the rule of law. So what the military administration of Muhammadu Buhari and today Diagbon essentially kidnapped Umaru Diko, kidnapped Adisa Akinloye, Richard Akijide in the UK, and put them into diplomatic crates, tried to ship them away from Stansted Airport. It was one of the neighbors of these politicians that saw what was going on and called the British police. And they ordinarily they are not supposed to search a diplomatic whatever, but they did, because that diplomatic pouch, this container that had been labeled as diplomatic whatever, has now been reasonably found to be used for crime. And that was how that attempt to fly them into Nigeria was thwarted. So younger generation might not know. I was in secondary school when this happened. The incumbent has done the same thing with Nnamdi Kanu again. It's the same man. He's just dropped his military uniform and donned an agbada and put on a cap. But the habit is still the same. The leopard doesn't change, it spots. So what we've done essentially, when they say extraordinary rendition is just a big fancy word for kidnap or abduction. There's no two ways about it. And the reason why they call it, in international law, you have rendition, repatriation, or surrender, okay? When they say extraordinary rendition, the reason why they use extraordinary, but this is out of place. And out of place kidnap, and out of place abduction, when you can use the rule of law and due process to do it. And that was the same process that was used. Unfortunately, this time around, it happened on African soil in Kenya. There was no neighbor that came to Nnamdi Kanu's rescue this time around, and he was successfully kidnapped and moved to Nigeria. What has now happened was that the appeal court, because Nigeria is part of the international community, and this is the forte of international human rights law. international criminal law, international human rights law. They're all intertwined with international law as well. These are bodies of law contained. International law is the general corpus of law. And inside international law, you have international human rights law, you have international criminal law. And what has happened here is that Nigeria has breached its obligations under international law. Same with Kenya. And if you've breached those obligations, because we're part of the international community, we're not an island, we're signatories to international instruments. You know, a country cannot be seen to be kidnapping. Okay? So his lawyers changed tactics from what they were doing before and went to the appeal court and said, you cannot, who goes to equity must go with clean hands. You cannot bring him to court in Nigeria because you have not done the right thing. If you had passed through due process and the rule of law in Kenya to extradite him to Nigeria, this man jumped bail. Even that jumping of bail is questionable because the gentleman was in his ancestral home and everything. The army went in there and invaded the place and he fled for his life. Okay? You cannot try Nnamdi Kanu in Nigeria without obeying the law. And that was why he was discharged. Because Nigeria breached international human rights laws. You can either return him to Kenya and try to bring him back again, or hand him over to the British because he's also a British citizen, let him go back to the UK. But in as much as he's in Nigeria, illegally, we essentially threw a sack on his head and just bundled him and brought him here. That's what the Court of Appeal has said. We have to obey the rule of law, follow due process. I understand the Attorney General has gone to file an appeal, and I don't see that appeal going anywhere. Nigeria has to obey its international human rights law obligations. It's as simple as that.
But they're still holding him captive.
Illegally. There's a court, there's a judgment. And when they even try to go and file their stay of execution and everything, they filed it in the wrong registry. It should have been filed in the registry of the Court of Appeal. They went to the Supreme Court, and I understand that they were tongue-lashed over there, and that they should know better.
Let's look at the Diezani Alison-Madueke's case, right? Could you, like, for Nigerians that don't know, talk about the corruption allegations against her, right? And the chances that they have bringing her back from the UK to face the charges against her?
Well, I don't have insider information on Diezani's case apart from what we've all seen, read in the newspapers and read online and all. And what I can deduce from following all the court cases and everything, with allegations of corruption were leveled against her and some members of that government, the Jonathan administration. And they identified their assets and asked them to come and explain how they came about it. And a lot of them could not. You know, finding diamond-encrusted underwear to, you know, high-rise properties. And it's not just Diezani alone. Even, have you forgotten in Abuja, there was a certain female civil servant that was caught with 45 houses. So essentially the bottom line is, explain your source of wealth, and you can't do that. How on earth is a civil servant going to explain how she got 45 houses? What was your salary? What are you doing? Are you mining gold? Or are you trading in, you know, in diamonds? It's just unexplainable. And it's not very difficult, you know, if you're into international criminal law, to trace these things. Even some of our associates, Kola Alapinni and Gideon Mokore and all, Kola Alapinni, the U.S. government seized a yacht from him, a super yacht. They seized an apartment in New York, because you can't. How do you explain that amount of money? If you're a sports person, or you won the lottery, or you're a musician and you have a #1 hit tune around the world, yeah, you can say, this is what I do. These things are not difficult to see. You play for one of the top clubs in the world, or you have an invention that everybody is buying. You know, say you discover another form of Viagra now, and you know, Viagra made Pfizer very profitable again, and everybody's buying from you. It's difficult to say, this is what I do. You can substantiate it. The electronic trail is there. So for a minister who had been working in Shell, even if you are in the top echelon of Shell, there's a limit to, except you own an oil well, you cannot explain this source of income. And that's why basically she stayed away, because in my own view, she would know, it will be a problem. But the reason why we've not been able to repatriate her from the United Kingdom to Nigeria is because, it's not because she's a British citizen, because she's actually dual, she's actually a tri-citizen. She carries a British passport, she carries a Nigerian passport, but except you've been a keen follower of the case, or following this trend in international criminal law circles, she has a diplomatic passport of a Caribbean country, which was procured a few days before she left government. She got possession of this passport. So Diezani is essentially a diplomat, and you cannot touch her. Even the British government cannot touch Diezani, because as long as she holds a valid diplomatic passport. Some of these passports can be procured for like $200,000 or thereabouts, or more, from some of these tax havens, or quite a number of Caribbean countries offer these passports for sale to, as cash revenue for their countries. And it is within their right to do so. They can appoint you a trade commissioner, for instance, and give you this diplomatic passport. So far, you carry the diplomatic passport, you are immune from prosecution. And that is the case with Diezani.
So she's immune to anything the Nigerian government wants to do to her?
So far, she carries that diplomatic passport.
So probably that's why they've resorted to seizing her property.
Yeah, we can do that, because those things are within the territory of Nigeria. You can seize the assets. We have a forfeiture of assets act. You can do all that. The British government can also seize assets if they feel that these assets are proceeds of crime. But to actually put her in the dock, have you ever seen a diplomat charged before? It's not possible. Maybe Augusto Pinochet, who was a former president of Chile, General Augusto Pinochet. But even then, they still set him free eventually, because those were the days when in international criminal law, and we were trying to build up the issue of universal jurisdiction. What the court said, that if you are head of state and you do have this immunity, your immunity does not cover you from criminal acts and all that. But I think in Augusto Pinochet's case, he was released on health grounds and everything, so he wasn't tried, and he was able to die in Chile peacefully. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
This is it for today. I hope to see you next time.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us today on the show. I hope you took one or two things out of this. So leave your comments in the comment section. Whatever you think you would like us to talk about, you can leave it in the comment section. See you next time on Let's Talk About It.